Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to join before we get started, but we're going to focus today on the benefits of what you can gain from delaying your cloud migration until now. But before we get started, I wanted to give a little info about us. We are Tempo Software. We're one of the largest Atlassian marketplace apps. And we help teams collaborate, plan, and schedule resources, manage budgets, and track time directly from their daily workflow. ISOS Technology is a consulting services provider and an Atlassian Platinum Solutions partner with ITSM, cloud, and agile at scale specializations. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce all of us. So I will start with myself. My name is Melissa. I've been at Tempo Software for almost 4 years, and I manage our North American strategic partnerships. So I will send it over to Shannon.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shannon Mason. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Tempo and a self-affirmed lover of the cloud. I have been at Tempo in a variety of different roles for almost 3 years and really excited to talk about something that I'm passionate about, which is this move to cloud. And I'll hand it over to Dan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Wilson, head of practice here at ISOS Technology. I've been working with Atlassian tools for about 6 years now and loved it so much I came and joined ISOS Tech about 4 years ago and have learned migrations and all these wonderful things we were able to help others with. Been primarily focused on migrations for the last 2 years, 3 years, and it's a fun journey. Mix.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mixon, and I am a solutions engineer at Atlassian. I've been there for a little over a year now. And before that, I was an on-prem Atlassian administrator for about 7 years. So I feel your pain in this regard. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Melissa.
Thank you, everyone. So we wanted to get started here with the looming deadline that we have all been chatting about and hearing about for many, many days now. So I'm going to hand it back over to Mix and Shannon, and they're going to just kind of chat a little bit more about what that means for you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. So I guess everyone knows February 15th, 2024 is the date, and that is less than 100 days now. So if you haven't made a plan yet, my advice is to please start and make one. And one of the first things you can do is decide whether your migration is going to be simple or complex. And when I say simple, I mean fewer than 1,000 users, maybe 1 to 6 apps, and fewer than 100 custom fields. So that's simple. If it's going to be complex, that's going to mean more than 1,000 users, more than 6 apps, and more than 100 custom fields. And if you decide that your migration, if you can see it's going to be complex, I really, really highly recommend that you consult a partner. You're going to need help because if your team is anything like my team was, we ran kind of lean. So, we didn't have a lot of spare, hours to do this kind of thing and do your day job. So please, if it's complex, get that communication started now. We have seen in Atlassian that only 5% of our customers that have over 10,000 users have already migrated to the cloud. So, and we know that these customers, it can be more challenging and they need more help from partners. And with that, I'll hand it to Shannon.
Yeah, Mix, I would love to just affirm what you said. There's a difference between a complicated one and a not so complicated one. But one of the things that I really love about this webinar today is that you are seeing kind of the trifecta of coordination that happens between all of us here to make your process a lot faster. So as Mix mentioned, build a plan, build a roadmap, even if it's a simple change. You also might need to do a little bit of internal selling too around that change, around that shift. If you're doing applications as part of your move, a lot of us, like us here at Tempo, who build applications inside of the Atlassian marketplace that work really well with your Jira and Confluence products, what we've done is built tooling for you in order to support that transition. But as it gets more complicated, as you have more users, more things, more customizations that you've done, you really then want to lean on a partner like ISOs to really facilitate that, and then also work with your Atlassian solutions architects, solutions engineers in order to facilitate that change as well. So just to reiterate, we have lots of tooling, not only inside of the Atlassian marketplace and within Atlassian itself, but it's going to require a little bit of foresight, a little bit of thoughtfulness about how you're going to move and make that transition. And there's a ton of support to do that. So if you're on that complicated side, as Mix was describing, you definitely have that path to it. And there's some really sweet, I think, incentivization around that, which isn't just around making our lives easier, because I think I said, right, I love cloud, but also around making that transition a little bit simpler. And Mix, I know that you had some details that you wanted to share with the group around facilitating that process.
I do, Shannon. Thank you. So another date you want to keep in mind is going to be November 30th. That's like 2 weeks from now. So if you claim your cloud migration trial by November 30th, it will last for 6 months. Okay, so make sure you claim it by then. It'll last for 6 months. If you claim it after then, it's going to last until the end of your maintenance period. All right. We also now have over 250 marketplace apps that are going to be included in sort of the extended cloud migration trial. So we have a list of those. So it's not only your core application now, it's going to be those apps as well. Not all of them, but a good many of them are. And then we have a few more incentives, like Shannon was talking about. We've got step-up credits. So that means, if you've already paid for maintenance, you're like, I don't want to waste that. That's money on the table. You're not going to lose that now with the step-up credit. We're going to credit that to you if you make a cloud purchase. We've also got something called dual licensing, where you can decide to buy the cloud, and then we'll give you a year of server maintenance or data center subscription at 100% discount. And then we've also got this great thing, which I don't think many people know about, which is called the incentive program. It's a subsidy for cloud migrations if you work with a partner that's specialized in cloud. And that is for organizations that have 250 to 2,000 users in their instance. And you can get up to $25,000 of assistance depending on the criteria for that. So your migration could end up being low to no cost. So again, that's only with a partner. So make sure, get in touch with us, get in touch with a partner, ask about the subsidy program, because we've got quite a pot of money to spend by December 31st. Okay, so but that's the cutoff. So another date. So November 30th, December 31st, February 15th. Those are the dates you want to remember.
Mix, thanks for sharing all the details around those dates. I mean, in order to make that migration really smooth and possible and be able to get some money back from doing that process by working with a partner like ISOs, obviously, that's one of those things that I'd love to see. Yeah. It makes everything go a lot smoother.
I was talking to, our internal teams, and he told me how much money, I can't say how much money we have left in that support program, but, he told me how much, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to get that out there, because that'd be just a shame, if we didn't take advantage of that. So, yeah.
All right, so now we are going to move over. We're going to talk about a success story we have with Jostens, and this is going to be one of those complex migrations at a larger scale, like Mix and Shannon were talking about.
So the Jostens migration was a project I got the opportunity to work and lead on. It was definitely one of the more complex ones we had done to that point. This has been about 18 months ago now that we've completed it. And it was a mix of Jira software on-prem and Confluence on-prem. And then they had a third-party software called Sharewell, where they were doing all their service management. And so their goal was to transform their entire organization. They had many teams that were working in different ways, using different workflows, different methodologies with their process, and they wanted to get an alignment. So it was a digital transformation as well as moving to the cloud for them. And so as we went through this migration, we were applying a lot of rework to their workflows, and we were also transforming them from a third-party system into JSM. We were able to do a ground to cloud. Well, it was a multi-phase approach. We did ground to cloud migrations for Jira software and Confluence first. Those went off fairly smoothly. After we got those in play, we started applying their new workflows, their new schemes, and getting those teams settled in. While that settling was happening, and lots of communication had to happen with their teams to make sure everyone was comfortable with it, we began digging into Sharewell and understanding what it is that they were tracking, how they were using it. This was really being used as an internal change control system. And so we rebuilt JSM to bring in the pieces that worked well for them in Sharewell, and took away the things that were really bottlenecks, helped iron out those bottlenecks. And then because it was from a third-party solution, we're not able to use the tooling that Atlassian provides, but here at ISOS, we've developed some internal tooling that allowed us to take that data and push it into JSM, hitting the fields as specified by Jostens. It was a really excellent way to help them transform from a on-prem heavy overhead infrastructure placement into the cloud where they don't have that piece. Several other things were also laid into this project. As they moved in, they began using advanced roadmaps, and they also began using Tempo. And so we worked with the Tempo team to get their time cards moved up and configured as they needed. And as they began working through this, they found that they needed additional support because they had reporting. Financial reports had to go out on a regular basis. And we went back to Tempo and had to go through the APIs. And so Tempo is one of the more developed applications out there. We were able to use their API interface and ultimately pull out the data the client needed and dump it into an Excel sheet for their more advanced financial needs. So if you have a problem, we'll work through it with you. We're looking to use our partnerships with app vendors like Tempo and others that you might have in mind. And the tooling that's coming from Atlassian is also helping us make these migrations a lot easier as we move forward.
Dan, I have a question for you on Justin specifically. So you mentioned it was complicated or
Yes.
complex, might be the better word, right? One of the things that that I think we see a little bit is that this move from server to cloud usually does instigate a little bit of transformation conversation. How often are you seeing that when you're doing these migrations?
It has become more and more common. We just completed another transformation migration with another client that they were literally changing it as we were transforming this data in flight. So we weren't able to use Atlassian's tooling, but we used our software again that allowed us to remap the fields, remap the schemes, and move this data from the starting point up to the target. It does add some overhead. We typically prefer to go like for like, and we like to ask clients to consider your data ahead of time. Are there pieces you don't need that doesn't need to move up, and we can leave those behind? Or if there's changes that you do intend to do, we prefer to do them on the other side so that we're able to validate that the data has completely moved and the workflows and everything are still in place. With the transformations, that does take extra testing just to validate everything's good.
All right. So
I have
now
one more question, Melissa, if that's okay with you.
you're fine.
So in that process of doing transition, because we did have a few folks that responded to the poll that they're in flight or they might not even be using Atlassian currently too. That was an interesting data point there. One of the things that I'd love to know too, Dan, Mix, either of you, in that process of transition, how often do you see organizations kind of setting up those trial instances or setting up those like the future state and then do a lot of testing? What should people think of as they're moving through that process and thinking about that transition? How much to test, how much to prepare as part of their roadmap?
Yeah, as a partner, we are doing multiple rehearsals. On average, I'd say we do 5 rehearsals with the data before we turn it over to a client to do testing. We do recommend that they bring in their power users and have at least one testing session. If it's a larger data set, quite often we'll do a second. And then we have a validation before we get to the cutover weekend. As we're doing the rehearsals and preparations for those test cycles, we might bring in the client team just to validate there's some pieces are looking correct before we again turn it over to the larger group. But For ISOs to run it, we typically want to get those 5 rehearsals in, find all the issues that might occur, and we also rely on Atlassian quite a bit. So Mix would be somebody we'd go back and say, hey, we need some engineering here. What's going on? We can't see everything. I don't know, Mix, can you kind of give some light from your perspective there?
Sure. So, typically we have our customers at least upgrade to premium when they're doing this, so that they have the benefit of a sandbox. And so they can test to the sandbox. And sometimes, like if they don't have a partner and they test to the sandbox and they're like, okay, maybe I need some help. So, if they do some of that testing themselves first and they sort of get a better idea of what they're in for, and then they might be sort of more open to engage with a partner at that point, because they realize sometimes it's a little bigger job than they can handle by themselves.
Yeah, it's a big cake sometimes, right? And
Yeah.
you both mentioned something that I also we've done here too at Tempo, right? Which is, we know that these things oftentimes don't happen during the work day, during the work week. And so there's a plentiful support on the weekends, on off hours, to make sure that this sort of transition aligns with what works. Tempo here, we have a whole team that's staffed to facilitate this on the weekends, answer the call when Dan says, hey, we need you to open up this API endpoint so we can make this happen. And I know, ISOS and Atlassian also have that level of support as well too for that transition.
Yeah, we do look to schedule out these to be off work hours, so we are not impacting users. We always take a snapshot at that last moment after we've shut down the active instance, so that we know we have all the data. And then we work through, our goal is to always get the migration in within that Friday night, Saturday, Sunday time window, so that people can return to work on Monday morning ready to go, and all the apps in place and acting as expected. And we do schedule this out with Atlassian. Throughout the migrations, we have regular check-ins with our support engineers from Atlassian to make sure that we haven't forgot something, they've not forgot something. We've got all the correct flags and little bits and bobs in place for this.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when you open a support ticket and request migration support internally, we call that a move ticket. And so that's going to be the place where everything about your migration is in the move ticket. So if you hear that term, that's what we mean. And then if there are individual problems or issues that come up during the migration, we'll open up a problem ticket that is associated with that move ticket. So, and it's a different issue, so we can run reports, identify trends that are happening with the migrations, so just so you know, that's kind of the way that we track it internally. And so that if that move ticket is going to be the main one.
Yeah, so now that we have gone over the Justin success story, we're going to kind of deep dive into our experts' best tips and tricks for migration. So Shannon, Mix, and Dan, if you want to give our attendees your top secret tips and tricks on how to go through a successful migration.
All right. Well, we definitely just gave some good tips and tricks for sure. But Mix, what are your helpful hints? What are the absolute must-dos, best practices?
Yeah, so reach out to your EA at Atlassian. That's the one thing. We'll get you started. We'll actually talk to you on the phone in a Zoom call. Maybe I'll be on the call, but that way we can get you started. Sometimes we'll do the app assessment. Sometimes the partner will do that. And what that means is we take a look at your apps that you've got and figure out whether they're equivalent in the cloud. If you've got 10 apps that are like workflow or automation apps, we'll say, okay, maybe we need to look at this set of apps. Maybe we can condense that down a little. And so, because you want to try to make it as simple as possible, that transition. So if you can eliminate some variables like extra apps, that's something we definitely want to look at.
Yeah, some other things that we always encourage is to understand your data. Again, what is it you need to move? Going through the Jostens one, they had a requirement that 7 years had to come across. They do regular audits, and they had to retain 7 years. And I think they had 10 or 15 years worth of data there initially, so it's a fairly large data set, but which cutting it down to 7 definitely helped. Going through our regular rehearsals with that data set, we were able to understand the timing that was required. And typically we like to start 6 p.m. The time zone of the client that we're working with. But when it's something larger like that, they may say, hey, you can start at noon or you can start at 8 a.m. We'll take Friday off. Those are things that we need to be thinking about. So if you have a very robust set of data that might take more time, be prepared to look at the schedule and how you can flex on that. Another piece we look at are users. A lot of these systems are on-prem for many, many years. They'll get duplicate users in the system, and we can help clean those things up. But if you're aware of them and can start working on those things ahead of time, it'll help your process go faster. Preparing your users for change management, what to expect. We're going to be going to the cloud, slightly different interface. We won't have an edit screen. We'll just edit directly on each field in line. Lots of little things. It's going to be familiar, but different at the same time.
Dan, I think you hit on some of it. Oh,
sorry. One more thing I wanted to add was talk to your developers, like if they have special integrations or have written custom apps, or if you know that there's API calls going into that, and those, like collect those and make sure that you know where those are. Sorry, Shannon.
No, you hit on something that I was going to hit on, right? Which is there's that change management process. For me, there's all of the tactical things that need to happen around this. But what we've also encountered, right, is that this is oftentimes a bigger conversation that's in the IT organization as part of their service catalog that connects to their portfolio of services and things that they're doing for the business. So if you haven't gotten that buy-in, leverage folks like Mix, leverage folks like Dan to really start to craft that change management roadmap that goes in parallel with the shift, as well as, the discussion about why the benefits are there for moving from server to cloud. A lot of times we've grown up in this space where we were administering these really large, complicated implementations, and it's going to change. It's going to shift. It's going to free up time for teams to be able to do things of really high value in this new cloud environment, but it can be a little bit scary. It can be a little bit different. And so really work with your organization, work with your leaders, if you are a leader, to really plot that roadmap of what this means, and then focus on the value of that transition. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you costs at the end of the day. And we can realign our human capacity to things that I think oftentimes drive bigger value to our support groups that we're supporting inside of our organization. So that's one of the big things that I'd say focus on as part of it too, as a best practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Nix.
No, I was just going to say one more thing is, like, if you need help making that business case, Shannon was talking about to your executives, like, we're happy to help you do that. We're happy to help build that business case, come in, do the presentation, everything. And I'm sure, your partners would be as well. Yeah,
I was going to comment along the same lines. Just the level of infrastructure support that goes into running an on-prem Jira or Confluence instance, having that go away is going to help everyone out in the end. You can focus more on the tool and how it's being configured and used with the teams, instead of making sure that the hardware behind it is secure and running and still viable for the future, and not worrying about hardware management. Those are a lot of costs that this will help out.
Mix or Dan, I mean, both of you, I'm sure, have really strong opinions about this, because then budget kind of connects into it, and making sure that we prioritize the importance. What's one of the big objectives that are objections that you get, and how do you kind of manage it, especially when it comes into like the leadership buy-in? We don't have the time. We have a zillion other things going on. We've been asked to do a lot more with a lot less funding, with a lot less humans. How do you both handle that conversation?
Yeah, so the way that we talk about it is the value of the Atlassian cloud as a whole, right? Because we have so much investment going into our cloud platform and new features rolling out constantly. And it's not just about, getting off your infrastructure, which, is a savings. And typically our customers recoup their migration costs within a year. But it's also about making your teams more efficient as a whole, because we're keeping them where they work. We're reducing context switching because of the features that we're constantly developing, and the integration. So it's very tight integration between the different core products. And it's that value as a whole that I think the executives respond to more. They can kind of see it, making their developers more productive, having an environment that business teams are comfortable operating in, that is not geared towards agile teams, but geared towards them. Those kinds of things is what really the executives tend to respond to.
Dan, a little bit of a different version of that question for you. How do I convince my leadership team to make sure that we're working with a partner on this process?
Yeah, as Mix had mentioned earlier, she's been with companies that have come in and say, hey, we're going to just do this migration on our own. And they do that first push to their sandbox, or they set up a temporary instance and do that first push. And the results are kind of surprising to them. It's like, oh, that's easy. It's just, we use this tool and it goes. But there's a lot of things behind it. There's a lot of data points and pieces behind the scenes that take extra effort, some extra tooling. We've developed a lot of proprietary tools here at ISOS that allow us to get all the data points. We can find a script that can move calendars for teams in Confluence, but we find it ends up making more issues. And so we've developed a way to go and move those and get everything more complete. If they're looking to retain as much of the data in the original state, a partner is going to be able to help them with this. It's deceptively easy looking, but it's going to take that extra effort to get there.
I know one of the things for us here at Tempo too, and just helping to bolster the conversations that you all have, since we're focused on building product and everything, is around that parity functionality for one, making sure that people find the same sets of functionality from what they're familiar with, although oftentimes it does change a little bit. And then also really helping our customers understand the things that don't exist in their server environment that they're going to get access to. For example, a lot of our machine learning modeling and our AI functionality that exists in the cloud environment, right? And it gives a lot of additional benefits to our end users and our customers in terms of how they leverage the product. So that's been a big one for us, making sure that everybody knows, hey, this is what we're building. Here's where it is. If you come over along with your partner and with Atlassian, you're going to get these additional features, and it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Agreed. The partnership between Tempo, Atlassian, and partners and other app vendors also has just been invaluable as we go through this. I've got another migration going on right now where we're working with the Salesforce connector, and we've hit a couple unexpected walls, and they're jumping on and helping us through those connection concerns and helping the client feel more comfortable with what we're doing for them.
Awesome. So moving on, I know they've kind of hit on their tips and tricks for migration. So now we want to just kind of hone in on the tools that are then available to you all to help continue that migration path and have it be a successful one for you and your team. So I will hand it back over to Mix, Shannon, and Dan.
So I think, to get you started off, if you go to Atlassian.com/migration, that's a great starting point. As I said before, go through that, go through the phases. There's a migration toolkit you can download, and you can select whether you think it's complex or if it's under 1,000 users or over, and then you can download that file. And within that, there is something called a runbook template, and so you can see all the individual steps that you're going to need to go through to not only prepare, but do the actual migration and then test afterwards. And then you can sort of get a better idea. Can I handle this? Can I handle this by myself? And so that's one really great place to start.
I think for us, as I mentioned earlier, we've been building tooling to help folks move and facilitate that migration path. And then with our partnership with our partners to facilitate any sort of specialization or changes. But what we really want to do, as Mix mentioned, right, there's a lot that's been built to help facilitate this process. And then the beauty of partners is that they can add on top of it, make it seamless, make it perfect in terms of your data and making sure that transitions effectively. And so we've done a lot of work now since it's been, 4 years since we knew that this was coming. We've done a lot of work, a lot of improvements, a lot of modifications to our tooling in order to make these migrations possible.
Yeah, and not that people are tools, but I want to call out that your power users are your friends, and you need to be sure they are involved. We have lots of admins that go out there and run their systems, and they don't know everything that's happening because they have this one power user that he takes care of it themselves, or she does. And they maybe have set up APIs, they made all these connections, and we start moving things across, and they're like, "Wait, my thing's not working." And as we dig in, it's like, oh yeah, we had this API we set up 7 years ago that we forgot to tell you about, but we've been taking care of it. So make sure you know who your power users are, or who's kind of skirting the governance process and managing their own things. And it's been okay for you, but now we're trying to move it. We need to know about those things. So that's going to be a key piece for a successful migration, is understanding those connections.
Cool. So moving on to our lightning round. So what are some things that you can do today to start the cloud migration process?
Everything we just mentioned, but the first piece is to start, right? If you haven't had the conversation internally, start having the conversation. Just drop it in there. If it's been something that's been a little bit of an elephant in the room, my advice would be just start the discussion, just start being that agent of change around what this is going to look like. Because it's the deadline is coming, it's approaching. We can see it, we know it's there. So if you haven't had that discussion, my first point would be start having that discussion. Mix, Dan, I'm sure you both have a lot of additional guidance that you would say in terms of just what do we do?
Yeah, that plan is very key. Understanding your data is very key. But we'll have those key dates that are coming up that Mix mentioned at the beginning. If you go to isostech.com/server-in-of-life, you'll find those dates listed out for you and the benefits of getting in. Up to $25,000 in subsidies are out there. You might qualify for some of that. And as Mix alluded to, there's a large amount of money out there that you might as well put it to work for you instead of letting somebody else have it, right? Get in and claim your free trial, 6 months free ahead of time. And if you have a large migration, they'll do a free proof of concept up until December 31st is what our understanding. So get out there and take advantage of these great incentives that Atlassian's offering us.
Yeah. And I'm sure I sound like a broken record by now, but yeah, just figure out if your migration is going to be simple or complex. And if it's complex, ask your leadership to consider a partner, and then tell them, like Dan said, hey, there's money. May not necessarily have to pay for this. Let's see if we qualify. So if you can get somebody to help you or do it for you, do it. Yeah, and that's I guess that's my main. And call us at Atlassian so we can get on the phone and talk to you, engage your EA, because we can also help monitor the process. We can check in, so add us to those tickets, and so that we can keep an eye on what's going on. So we'd love to talk to you.
All right, so moving on, we have here's some great resources for you to explore. We're going to share those links with the slides as we send them out after the webinar. But we have a few questions. I wanted to pull up the chat here. So this would be a good one for Dan, well, and Shannon as well. So would you still recommend using a partner if we already have an internal team of Jira administrators? So I think Dan kind of hit on that a little bit, but just so we can pop back over to that question.
Yeah, I would recommend using a partner. We're doing multiple migrations a month with different clients, and we have a whole team here. We like to say at ISOs, you're not just hiring a team, but you're hiring our company. So if there's a new situation or a new use case that maybe your specific team hasn't dealt with in the past, somebody in our company has, and we share that documentation and knowledge across the company. And other partners, I'm sure, do the same thing, but I can only speak for ISOs. We here at ISOs are making sure that we are aware of what's going on and helping each other make successful migrations happen.
Yeah, I'd echo what Dan said, right? The amount of just volume of work that the ISOs team has done in terms of seeing all sorts of weird, different, strange things pop up. Their feedback actually has helped us build better migration tooling because they see everything. They see so many different models. And so there's a huge benefit in bringing in a partner. The other thing that's a benefit bringing the partner is also, I sometimes call it like the seagull consultative thing, right? That happens. Sometimes you might be advocating for something inside of the organization, but you're a known quantity. You're inside of the organization. So people might be like, yeah. We hear you, we understand. But you pull in somebody who's outside who said, yeah, this person's exactly right. I've seen some ish. This is what goes down. And all of a sudden you get a little bit more of that, that external neutral party boost that can really help move things forward and move things along and rally an internal organizational team to help make things happen. So those are a couple of the things that I'd say that are really helpful, especially with the complex change where you're trying to manage lots of different issues. There's a question in here around like different types of hierarchy styles, different ways that teams are working. And then in that process, because a lot of times it's also part of a more transformational conversation about how an organization is leveraging the Atlassian stack, how they're actually thinking and structuring things. You're working with someone like Dan, they can make recommendations about other products like Structure that can help do things like manage different types of work types and models and things like that as you're going through that process. So I'd say the benefit there is you get the whole house of knowledge that comes with ISOs. And then the other piece too is that, I think Dan, Mix, you guys probably have each other's phone numbers, right? So it's one of those things where, you can call somebody, they have that ability to just make a phone call.
Yeah, we do have connections into Atlassian, our Slack. We have a Slack channel with Atlassian and Connect. I don't think Mix is in our channel, unfortunately, but we do have lots of mixes.
Well, add me.
I'm happy to do it. So yes, we are closely connected with our partners and Atlassian as well.
And
Awesome.
sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, go ahead, Mix.
I was just going to say, I did answer a question in the chat about the dates, just repeating the dates that I had said earlier. So again, November 30th is the last day to get your 6-month free cloud migration trial. So if you do it after that, it's only going to correspond to the end of your server maintenance or data center subscription. December 31st is the last day to qualify for the subsidy program. So if you've got users, 250 to 2,000, you could get up to $25,000 in migration assistance through a partner that is specialized in cloud. So there's that. And then again, the third date, February 15th, 2024 is the end of life for server. So that means no more patches, no more updates, no more support. That is the end. So those are the 3 dates that I mentioned.
So to follow up on that answer, Mix, what happens if this attendee does nothing and stays on server?
So server it's a perpetual license, so it's not going to stop working. But you are at risk, especially if you're not behind the firewall, because if there is some sort of exploit, some sort of CVE that comes out, we're not gonna issue a patch for it. So you would be vulnerable. So it's not the safest thing to stay on server and not have the ability to patch your servers. So there's that. Also, you're going to miss out on all the new features that we're rolling out. And all the efficiencies that come with that. Yeah, and no more upgrades. So that's basically, it's not going to stop, but it does increase your risk dramatically.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mix. So another question that was asked is, if each development team works uniquely, what are your recommendations for working with pushback when trying to migrate the teams to a Jira Cloud instance that follows more enterprise-focused architecture? That was a mouthful.
Let's see. So, working with development teams. So, we do have different types of projects within the cloud. We've got we've got the company managed projects and the team managed project, right? So if you want everything to roll up into, like, say, advanced roadmaps, you're going to want to do company managed. But you can do team managed because that allows a little more flexibility and autonomy in those types of projects. So they can have more controls over the workflows and things like that. So, there are some options there. Typically when I was on an admin, we had buckets of, these types of projects, maybe 3 or 4 large buckets, and then we would set a configuration that met most of the needs for those 3 or 4 large buckets. And so there was usually compromise communication involved about which custom fields and statuses and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and more on that question, we've seen this before. There's teams that do push back and say, hey, the way I'm working works for me. Why are you making me change? And, we recommend doing a comparison and how big is this change really? A lot of teams get into semantics, to do or next up. Naming conventions really get in the way sometimes, and it's just working through with your product teams, making sure, or development teams, making sure that they understand it's not the end of the world. We might have to change a word here. We might be able to put in an extra step that only your team uses. But the more you can align your company, the smoother things are going to run. The easier you'll be able to pass around that work and synchronize with another team should you have dependencies. When everyone's working in their own way, it tends to slow things down, create some of those bottlenecks that we're all trying to get rid of every day.
Awesome. Dan, next question is going to be for you. It's a multi-step question. So I'll start with the first few here. So this is regarding Jostens. So they're wondering how many users and how long was the migration when it started? And then how many issues? And did you move all at the same time?
I honestly don't remember the numbers, so I apologize for that. It's been a while since we've done it. It was definitely over 2,000 users. We started in June and completed the migration in April, I believe. It was a phased approach where we did all the Jira software projects and Confluence migrations. We started those and completed that before Christmas. And then we picked up and did a lot of configuration and transformation for those teams over the Christmas holiday and into the new year. Took a bit of a pause, making sure that they were solid and all the questions and concerns answered. And then as those final things were being laid out, we started the second phase where it was the Cherwell migration. We were moving all of their tickets from Cherwell, transforming them into JSM. And that was the more complex piece. But typically we try to pull everything on a migration into a single weekend. It's the cleanest, but we have done multiple migrations, multiple phases. We just wrapped up one that ended up being 4 phases for 500,000 issues. And so that number's fresh in my head. Sorry, I didn't have the exact number for Johnson's.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. So our final question is, I'm in the cloud now, what do we do?
Well, sorry, go ahead, Mix.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just like in the Jostens instance, start taking advantage of the tools that the cloud's brought to you. You got advanced roadmaps. You have team is a new concept there. You can start creating a team and pulling all the people together to communicate, see what everyone's working on. There's always a new product that I'm sure Mix can speak to more eloquently that Atlassian's rolling out. There's Atlas and other things that are going to be available for you guys to use.
Yep. And in addition to that, take advantage of Atlassian University. There's a list of free courses that I'm going to pop in the chat here in just a second. And there's also, I've got a community post about a list of courses for $39. So, you've got some no or low investment options for training available to you. And then also we have, in-app help also in the cloud, which is nice, which is, something that wasn't there on the on-prem. It basically, here's a tour. It guides you through how to do certain things, and if you get tired of it, just dismiss it. But that's a nice thing. If you've gone to a feature for the first time, usually there's help there right in the, in the product to help you.
Yeah, mixed, Dan. I think you both really described the I'm in the cloud now. What? It's like now a lot. There's so much that you now have access to. And I know just from talking with other application partners, with other folks in Atlassian from a product dev standpoint, there's so much focus, so much investment that's going on there. You've got the ability to leverage a lot of awesome automation. You've got the ability to leverage Atlassian intelligence, the AI functionality to really facilitate some things. So you have access to functionality that you just wouldn't have access to before. And those things that are being built, I know, especially here at Tempo, they're being built to both scale, to be secure, to be sometimes even local from a data residency standpoint. We've got all that validation. We're doing all of that work for you. We're carrying the bulk of the effort of containing the architecture, the infrastructure that you're sitting on. And that really frees you up to do innovative, cool work rather than, hey, I got to make sure that I keep this system up and running. And so there's all the feature stuff, but for me, it's kind of like if we lift up the hood, what's under there, it's that ability to really free up our teams to do cool things that actually push us forward, push us towards our strategic objectives as organizations. But there's a lot of cool features.
Yeah, there really are, and the features keep coming out, and you'll see as you're working in the systems in the cloud that almost every other week there's a new thing where they've improved the interface. The issue creation has just recently changed, that it's now a little window in the corner. So if you need to see your board while you're working on a project and, hey, did I make that task yet or not, you can actually see your board, know where you're at in the process, and it just makes it easier versus the modal that covered everything. And you start creating the ticket and am I doing a duplicate? What's going on? It's just little things like that. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're using this system and you see those come through, I really appreciate those things that Atlassian's rolling out. I feel like there's one question that was stated in this webinar is, I've waited this long. What's the benefits to me now? I just wanted to call out the biggest benefit to you guys that have waited. You've got these incentives waiting for you, but we've seen in the last 6 to 9 months, the maturity of the tooling to move things in has increased significantly. And so, if you've been concerned about the complexity and how it works, the tooling has really improved. And so I just want to tell you guys, maybe you're kind of late to the game. If you are, don't worry. The tools have helped us get better at the process. So take that extra benefit of delay to your side.
Shannon, there's actually another question that just came in that's for you. So they want to know, could you speak to the support our apps can receive during a migration again?
I mean, I think Dan just hit it, right? So there's not only the tooling, as I mentioned, Tempo, we have an entire team here that will coordinate and work with you. We connect into what Mix was talking about those move issues and things like that. There's just so much coordination and connection between our organizations to help facilitate your change and transition, in addition to just the fundamental support of the sorts of tools that you need to do migration, like fundamental migration. So there's a ton of support. It starts fundamentally at that tooling level, right? Can we get this information moving in a simple migration? Or if it's a complex migration, we might need to add a little bit more jazz to what we're doing. And then from there, you're working with partners, you're working with Atlassian that we're prepared to do this. We've been doing it now for a really long time, it feels like. And so we've got this sort of online, on our support that you require in order to make those transitions feasible. So it's this is power teams right here in order to make this happen for you. And it's not too late. That's, I think, the big thing too, right? It's not too late. You've got enough time. You've got a lot of fun incentives, but it's not too late to make that transition.
Awesome. Well, this concludes our time. I hope everyone found this very valuable. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to ISOS, our preferred solution partner for migration. So thank you so much to our panel as well, and all of you for joining today.